Well, hi everyone. Thank you all for joining us today on this lovely Friday. I am Emily, the content manager here at Birdie, and I will be your host for today's webinar session. Now, as you can see, I am joined by the lovely Sarah from Hummingbird Care, and we also have Joe from Birdie on the call as well. And I will let them introduce themselves in just a minute once everyone has had a chance to join us, as it has only just gone 1 o'clock, and I know some people are probably grabbing their lunch or a coffee. So we'll just give that a minute. And while we do wait just to get started, if you can hear me okay, if you could just pop an emoji or a yes or anything you like into the chat box, just so I can be sure that everyone can hear okay. And also, can I just ask you, Sarah, just to say a quick hello as well?
Hi.
And Joe, could you say hi too? Joe? Ah, there we go. I just wanted you to say a quick hello, that's fine. If everyone can hear us okay, great, thank you. And I can also see that we have Ravi on the chat joining us today. So if you have any problems whatsoever during this webinar, if you can't hear us or if you need anything at all, pop a message into the chat box and Ravi will be on hand to give you some help. Perfect. Right, well, we're a couple of minutes in. I think most people have joined us now, but if you haven't joined a webinar session with me before, I just want to run through a few things, what you can expect from today and what we're going to be covering. So, just to let you know as well, you're all on mute. So if you start talking to us, if you have a question, we can't hear you. So please do put messages straight into the chat box, otherwise you'll just be talking to yourself. Cool. So today's session. Now, the reason we run these sessions, if you've been to them before, you'll probably know a little bit about what we're doing. But at Birdie, we basically want to help all of our partners be the best they can be in terms of their care agencies. And during COVID-19, we knew that there was a big challenge, and we wanted to share as much expertise as we could. So we've done webinars on things like PPE, on recruitment, and today we're joined by Joe and Sarah to talk about digital assessments. Now, since the COVID outbreak, we have seen our partner agencies really embrace digital technology and in particular assessments. So today we're kind of talking about the difference that it can make, why they're great for agencies to use, but you don't just want to hear that from me, which is why we've invited Sarah along. As at Hummingbird, they've been using digital assessments during COVID-19 and hopefully beyond. So she'll be giving us her perspective on that. And we also have Jo from Birdie, and she will be giving us the expert opinion from the technology side of Birdie. Now, we do want this session to be as useful as possible to you. So if you have questions as we go along, like I said, pop them into the chat box and we'll get to them as we go. We'll get to them either at the Q&A at the end, or if they're relevant to what we're talking about at the time, I'll squeeze them in. Cool. Well, let's get going. So Sarah, first of all, can I just ask you just to introduce yourself very quickly to everyone who's listening?
Yep, I'm Sarah. I'm from Hummingbird Home Care. My job title is Care Team Leader. My responsibilities are to manage all the staff and the clients within our domiciliary care company. So that's obviously doing all the staff supervisions, observations, initial assessments for all the clients, reviews for all the clients, and obviously just general managing the whole team.
Perfect, thank you. And Jo, can I just ask you to do the same? Can you introduce yourself and let everyone know what it is you do at Birdie?
Sure. So hi everyone. I am a product manager at Birdie, and my area of the product is the assessment work that we've been doing. I have thoroughly enjoyed trying to help solve your problems around that space. And I just, as a general bit of information, I'm a sort of GP by background, but have moved into the health tech space for the last few years.
Great. Thanks, Jo. So you guys, if you have anything specific to ask either of them, please just pop that straight into the chat box. Cool. Great. Now, the first question I have is for you, Sarah. Now, there's been a lot of challenges with COVID-19, but in terms of assessments, what were the biggest challenges that you faced?
I think it was trying to reduce the risk to clients and staff, exposing them to more people than was absolutely necessary. I think it was the changing over from the paper risk assessments and support plans that we already had in place, and finding a way to do those remotely, because obviously we're working all remotely from home, the main office team. I found it was a great advantage because I had a tablet, put Birdie onto the tablet, which enabled me to then go into the clients' homes and do assessments directly straight onto Birdie, which obviously meant like GDPR and things, there wasn't the paper trail at home for me to protect, as well as obviously having things locked away on a tablet.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a really, really interesting point with the digital assessments as well. They're not just hosted online. You can actually do them, you know, on a tablet or something. You remove the need for paper, which can be, obviously, if you need to leave it in the client's house, like you just mentioned, it can be a GDPR issue around that. So the next question I have for you, Sarah, though, is how do you think those challenges that you had will extend beyond COVID-19? You clients and discharges, everyone really. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it was at the beginning of COVID, we decided that it was easier to manage hospital discharges, hospice discharges, because we didn't want to be going into those environments and obviously spreading the risk by us going back and forth. So we were able to take the basic information from their social worker, whether it be hospital social worker or a council social worker, take the basic information, upload that onto Birdie, and then actually go out that day, do the rest of the assessment in the client's homes on that day, and the care could start immediately on that day because everything was uploaded live. So it meant that all the medications, all any extra personal information that they, that needed to go on there, that the carers needed to be aware of, it was all live and uploaded. So it just made things quicker. So that it wasn't a case, because previously we were going out doing an assessment, going back to the office, doing a file, uploading all the information, getting it all out to the support workers, and then obviously the care was starting a few days later. But this has basically made us sort of go paperless to make the turnaround a lot quicker. So clients are getting home from hospital a lot quicker, from hospices a lot quicker. And also the intermediate care team that have been taking over, obviously when they first come out of hospital, were able to put their utilities in other places because we were able to cover quicker.
That's great. And that's something that in a crisis, especially, COVID-19 and hopefully no other crises, but if there was to be any, that, you've done this and you have this experience, and getting people the care that they need as soon as possible is something that we all want to do, and it's good to hear that using those digital assessments has enabled you to do that, for sure. Cool. Now, Joe, we've just heard from Sarah a few of the benefits that she has had from using digital assessments, but in your mind and from the Birdie product team, what are the benefits of using digital assessments?
So I think actually Sarah's covered it very concisely from me. So I think we can answer this question from two perspectives. So how is going digital helpful? And then how is going digital with Birdie like an added benefit as well? So with regards to the digital, I think Sarah's covered it. So it's the efficiency, it's the speed with which you can carry out the assessments. The data is all live, so care can be started extremely quickly. And obviously that's hugely time saving and beneficial to the care recipient. But I think one of the other things that we're super proud of at Birdie is that the assessments that we build. So we create the assessments, and if there are any changes to sort of regulations, or if we get any customer feedback about them, we can adapt our assessments immediately or pretty quickly in order to accommodate those changes. So it's agencies don't have to take on the responsibility of updating forms and assessments. That's kind of our job, which takes a lot of sort of overload or additional work away from agencies, so that we can continue to give industry leading assessments, but agencies don't have to do that as well, because you've got enough on your plates, really.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point there. And the next question I had sort of covers what you were just saying, Joe, and it was to ask you, Sarah, if you agree with those benefits. And we just had a question that came in that says, can I ask how long do you find doing assessments via Birdie digitally? So this kind of ties into those benefits. We just spoke about time saving and, you know, the speed that you can then give the care. And Joe outlined some of the benefits of being digital in general. But now my question to you, Sarah, is, you know, are they the biggest benefits for you in Hummingbird Home Care? And also, how long does it take you to do an assessment?
At the moment, it's quite difficult because we're just having obviously all the new updates on Birdie. So at the moment, it is taking me quite a while because I'm finding at the moment I'm doing an assessment, then we get a new update on Birdie, and then I'm having to go back and redo all the assessments again. I'm quite sure obviously that's going to be a temporary thing, because once everything's up and running properly, I won't have that issue because it'll be from day one that assessment's done fully. As I say, at the moment, I'm finding it difficult because I'm going out doing the assessment, everything's up and running. And then this week, obviously, we've had quite a few new updates. So I'm having to go back over all those assessments again. It usually takes me about an hour because, like I say, I download as much information as I can before I go out to see the client, then update it while I'm in the home with the client. And it just means also that the support workers are able to see information about that client before they actually get there. So when they're sat out in the car before they go and meet this client, they're aware of the background, any disabilities or support that they need, and what their main tasks are when they're actually going into that client. So it is a benefit in that way because the support workers are more prepared, and also because they are able to look on the daily notes from the previous log if there was any concerns or any issues or anything that they had previously with the client. So for a carer's point of view, and I've had feedback from quite a number of staff, saying from their point of view, it's much, much better because they're not having to go into a client's house to read the notes. They're prepared before they get in there to know what they're actually going into.
That's great. And that's something that we didn't really mention there, was the benefit for carers. And I suppose with a paper assessment, they, like you said, they would have to go into the house to then read it, to then deliver the care, but they'd have to spend the time reading it. So not only is it saving you time in the office, well, hopefully, saving you time in the office, it's also saving the carers time as well. And are you finding that your carers are reading them before they go in? Yeah,
definitely. They normally, I obviously meet them at the client's home. I normally sit with the client then for like half an hour or whatever while they're making the lunch or preparing the medication or what have you. But it just gives me that time to actually sit down and actually spend time with that client before the package is fully started. But it gives the carers insight before they get there as the basic needs of that client, which is something I think they've not really had before. Something that obviously I'm going to raise with Ravi and perhaps Joe is that it would be a good idea to have something on Birdie where the carers can actually document that they have read the support plan before they go in, to a new client, because I think that would then obviously protect the client, it would protect us, it protects everybody basically, because they're aware of what they're going into. And they understand the tasks that have been set out beforehand. So I think it would be a good idea if there was somewhere that the carers, note to say that they've read that information.
Sorry, Joe. No, you carry on.
No, my bad, Sarah. That's really helpful feedback, and it's stuff that it's something that we've heard of before. It's very much on sort of the priority list. Ravi hates this, but I try not to give timelines on things. But it's really decent feedback, and we'll look into that for you. So thank you.
No, definitely great. And that was just something I was just going to say, thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And I think a little bit later, we're going to be talking about the future of digital assessments and, what else we can do. And I think, the way you mentioned that, it's a possibility for digital, like beforehand, if a carer, they could just say that they've read the notes and they actually haven't. This kind of gives a possibility of, I suppose, not proving, but it's just another layer. you know, you in the office, you know that your staff have been through it, you know that they're aware, and you have a digital footprint for that. And that's really, really interesting. And that's somewhere that definitely I can see the future of care is going to be going that way. So super, super interesting to hear you say that as well. Now, there's just a couple of questions that have just come in before I go on to the next one. I suppose, Joe, this would be more for you. Karen asked, do you have to type the information in or can you talk? And there's also another one that's very, very similar. Which tablets work best with Birdie, i.e. for performance or voice recognition? So maybe you could just take a minute just to answer those for us, Joe.
Sure. So what we've really concentrated on is transferring forms from paper to digital. So in order, you can only at the moment fill in the assessments through typing them. The Carer app, you can use voice recognition when you're recording visit notes and such, but at the moment the assessments are, you need to type into them. We have tested Birdie assessments on an iPad and it seems to work very well. Sarah, I'm curious to know which tablets you're using. Is that the same?
It's Samsung.
Oh, okay, cool. So those we know work well. So yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk about it in more depth, Roger, another time, but we know that they work on iPads very well.
Great, thank you. Sorry for that quick interjection. I thought I just tied in really, really well. Now, so I am going to use a buzzword here. We always hear this buzzword. But Joe, I'm going to direct this to you first because, you know, in the product side of Birdie, you created these assessments. Now, how do you think they can deliver more person-centered care? And in a second, we'll ask Sarah if that's, you know, if that's how it's working for her. But for you first, Joe, how do you think they can?
Sure. I'd be super interested to hear what Sarah says, but from my perspective, I think the most important thing in order to deliver person-centered care is to really understand a client's needs and preferences so that you can tailor care for them. And using digital assessments at Birdie kind of gives you that ability. We've built a product that gives care managers the ability to assess a broad range of care areas. So things like personal care, medical care, financial care, among others. But there's also so that there's a holistic understanding of a client. But in addition to that, where there's a need or a preference that's been identified about a client, what we also try to encourage or enable is a more deeper dive into that area. So kind of a classic example I give is if you're doing a psychological needs assessment, we ask if there's any concerns around memory. And if the answer to that is yes, we give the ability for you to then do, for instance, a mental capacity assessment to understand really the impact of memory on that client's capacity. So for me, it's being able to understand the breadth and the depth of someone's needs. So for me, that's the first point. And the second point is just around how we built them, which is we try and add as much free text box as possible within the assessment so that when you get answers that or needs that really need specific recording, or we give you the ability to make these things sort of super person-centered. So that for me is what I believe is helpful. But I mean, I'd like to defer as well to Sarah.
Yeah, I think it's a learning process for me too, because as I've obviously started doing this more often now, and I've been using the Birdie for all the support plans and risk assessments, I think it's been a learning tool for me on how to, obviously at first, when we first started Birdie, it was a case of I wanted to get all the clients on the system as quickly as possible because COVID first started and I was obviously then working remotely. But as things have progressed, I've made those bigger. So I've gone more in depth and more person-centered with each care plan. This week, obviously the software and everything the platform itself has grown massively. So I'm trying to go back over those again and again, grow them more to make them more person-centered. And today I've noted that the medication part has changed again. So that was one of our issues because there wasn't like a risk assessment around the medication. So whether medications were locked away or whether they can be left out for a client, or whether they actually, there was any kind of restrictions on that. So we would normally do a separate risk assessment for that, and there wasn't anywhere to do that for the medication. But I have noted today that has changed again. So I will be going back in. So I think it's just a learning curve. And I think obviously once everything is put back on properly now, I'm hoping that this will be the last update for this week. I can catch up. But no, it makes it more person-centered because I can go in individually. I'm finding that I do the care plan side of things, then I go into the task, and I the way that I do the tasks is that I go into that client's house from the door, and I basically do that call. So I run through everything that I know that those care staff are going to need to do right the way through. And then I give them instructions for each of those tasks. So it won't just be open the curtains. It will be open the curtains, make sure the blinds are in a certain direction if that's what the client wants. So I make each task now person-centered to that person. It's not just a task. And I give as much information as I possibly can. Down to each task, which has made it a lot easier because the care staff are having to obviously go through all those tasks. And if they're saying they've done something and I find out they haven't done it, then obviously, I need to know the reason why they're saying that they've done that, they've not. So it does make it more person-centered because it's more about that person and those individual tasks.
That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing that with us, Sarah. I mean, that's Jo, I'm sure you'd agree that's exactly the way that we intended the assessments to be used.
Absolutely, it's like music to my ears. I do have to apologise for the huge updates this week. That for the time being will be the last one of a big update. So I definitely think you'll be able to catch up on yourself. So apologies for that.
It's just really great to hear the way that it's being used, and the fact that it is making it more person-centered. Now, Sarah, do you think that the digital assessments are more person-centered? Sorry, I can't get my words out. More person-centered than paper? A lot of P's.
Yeah, because they're live updates. So whereas with a paper care plan, once it was written, as soon as it's written, basically it's obsolete because something can change that day, and it's no longer current. Whereas with Birdie, if something happens or something changes, it's a live update. So you can change it and adapt it. For instance, this week, I've had one client that's gone from being able to answer the door to now having to use the key safe to enter a property. And instead of it being that I have to send out loads of messages to all the staff, it's just updated on Birdie, all the information is put on there. So it's just simple things like that can be updated instantly. So rather than it being a piece of paper and then having to get more paper out and wait for the staff to read that update, it's all done live. And so that in that respect, things like medication as well. Basically, the way that we're working it is if the support staff are told that a client has new medication, they're sending me information of that medication, the prescription labels, and they're being updated live, all the medications, so they can be administered as soon as possible.
That's perfect. And I suppose given the situation that we're in at the minute with COVID, where you want to reduce the amount of contact that I suppose that you're doing as well. You don't want to keep going to a client's house to update a mark sheet. No. This is ideal.
Yeah, because obviously at the moment the chemists are saying that they don't really want you to go in there to collect the mark sheets. So we're trying to restrict that by when the blister packs are coming through, the care staff are uploading that onto Birdie for us when the new blister pack's done. So they upload it as a picture, and then I update the Birdie mark with that. Obviously, if it's a cream or anything, then they upload them directly onto Birdie for me, so it's all secure.
No, that's perfect. And again, that's probably saving time all round. No one has to drive around and get the mark sheets. It's a lot safer. And it's great to hear that's the way you're using it. Now, there's just a question that came in that, Jo, I'd like to direct this to you. It sort of fits in with what we're talking about here. And Maureen says, when the support plan comes up for review, is it the whole plan rewritten or the existing one amended? If it's amended, what controls are there? The date has just not been changed. And this relates to Sarah's point about making an update about, say, her client that now has the key safe box. Like, how do we know that that's been amended on a certain date?
Okay, so the way that our architecture works is that we save and store all the events that have happened, so we know who's made the change and when. In addition, rather than what's the best way to say, so there is always that audit trail there. And there's also the ability to sort of download that care plan and save a version of it so that you can prove that you haven't just changed the date, that an actual new change and a review has been done. Hope that helps.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
For me, sorry, can I just, I know one of the questions there says when the support plan comes up for review, is the whole plan rewritten? No, what I do, me personally, is I go in and I amend on the bottom of that support plan, I date it, and I put my initials on it to say that it's me that's changed it as that review date. So I don't change everything. If it doesn't need changing, if there's any part of it that's exactly the same, I just put on that I've reviewed that, no changes or concerns noted, and then I date it and I put my initials by it so that I know that it's me that's updated it and I've checked that, so it's a review of that plan. Obviously, anything that I'm changing, I'm doing the same with that. I put my initials and the date that I've changed that plan.
And then you can see that all those reviews and changes, or anything within Birdie.
Yeah,
it's great. No, that's really useful, and I hope Maureen that answers your question on that one. And thank you, Joe, as well. Cool. Right. Now, the next question I have is for you, Sarah. So, how long have you been using Birdie to carry out digital assessments? And what was the main reason that you decided to go digital from paper?
I suppose really it was COVID that pushed us to go completely, try and be as paperless as possible. Obviously, because I'm working from home, I'm in and out of the office as well, because the management team are sometimes coming into the office from necessity. So it was basically, I either had a car boot full of paperwork, or we were pushed to try and go as paperless as possible. I don't think that's been a bad thing, because I think it does help to streamline things a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it's also made it quicker for, as I've said previously, the packages to start quicker. So it's been more of a benefit for the clients. So I think that was the main reason why we decided to do that, was because of the fact that it was logistically having all that paperwork everywhere. Obviously, the only things that we really are continuing to do, which hopefully in the future we won't need to do, is things like consent to care forms, data protection forms, that type of thing. Obviously, we're still having to do with paper at the moment, but hopefully in the future there'll be some kind of e-signature that they can pop on Birdie and sign to say that yes, that's fine. And also for the medications as well, given consent for the medications to be given. So things like that, paperwork is still there, but hopefully in the future, who knows?
Joe.
Yeah, it's on my radar, Sarah. I took the hint. Thank you.
No, that's great. And that's the story that we're hearing a lot from, our partners and other home care agencies, that COVID happened and all of a sudden, there was loads of paper. It was so difficult because they were going into people's houses, and it, going digital just seemed to make sense. And I hope that, this carries on and people do continue, because we are hearing a lot of benefits from going digital, and I'm glad that you're sharing those with us. But the next question I have for you, Sarah, is, so how often do you undertake assessments now compared to when you use a paper system? Is it about the same? Are you doing them more?
Probably, the thing that I probably use as most of my main tool at the moment is hats off to Ravi. Each Monday he sends me a report through. I check that report, and that guides me as to what care plans I need to review and I need to update, and that haven't got enough information on them. So I am using that at the moment as a really good tool for me to use as guidance. And I suppose really there isn't as much having to go back and check on those in like a 3-month time scale, because most of them are being updated quite regularly, because they are live. So everything is being changed constantly. Whereas previously it would be 3 months before paper would be changed.
Mhm.
So I suppose really I'm updating them live. If nothing's changed in them, then obviously I do follow, like I say, the update that Ravi sends me every Monday, and I check how long it's been since I've touched a care plan, because it might be that somebody's just sailing along quite nicely, nothing changes. So I haven't touched that care plan for a while, but that prompts me and keeps me updated.
That's great. And just to clear this up for anyone who's listening who isn't aware of the reports that Birdie sends, these are quality reports and they're based on visits, updating care plans. There's a lot of things in them, but they come directly from a Birdie account manager, and they're tied to everything that's going on with your care agency within Birdie. Now, if you want any more information about that, drop a message into the chat box, and I'm sure Ravi can send you some stuff. He is on the chat for you. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really great to hear that, you know, it's becoming more of, it's less of a task, I suppose, that gets done once every quarter, and it's now just part of your day to day, which is really great to hear. Now, the next question I have is for you, Joe, and this is a question that we hear quite a lot. When people ask about assessments and they say, well, how are they, you know, in line with say, for example, CQC, or how are they in line with industry standards? You know, how do they know that? And my question for you, Joe, is what are Birdie doing to make sure that these are, you know, really robust, comprehensive assessments that will tick those boxes?
Sure. So I think, of course, we aim to be industry leading, and it's really key that we work with agencies to get there. I'll use the mental capacity assessment as sort of an example to take you through how we try and reach these standards. So the first thing that we like to consider is whether there's sort of a clinically validated score or assessment available for that particular area. So for example, we use the Waterloo assessment for pressure sores because we know that health and social care use it and it's got sort of a seal of approval. Mm-hmm. If that's not the case, which often it's not, we then sort of do a bit of desk research. So we look at CQC guidelines, we look at any laws, especially around sort of mental capacity, and we'll also look at NICE guidelines and anything around that pertains to that issue. And once we have an idea of what's required based on sort of legislation and regulation, we'll then go out to agencies and try and understand what their problems are. So when you complete a mental capacity assessment, what are the problems that you come up against? What do you need when you're assessing the capacity of a client? And then we kind of take all of that back, create some designs, and then get more feedback from agencies, and really try and iterate and improve on the design and the content of the assessments. We push, once we're happy, we push them live, but that's kind of not the end of the process, which is what's really important to us. So once we're live, we gather a lot of feedback from people like Sarah to understand where we could improve. And obviously we also keep an eye on sort of CQC regulations and things. And we've built the assessments in such a way that they can sort of we can update them fairly easily, as Sarah has mentioned. So what we try and do is this whole process of sort of working with agencies, looking at legislation and regulation and constantly trying to improve it. That's what I believe makes us sort of achieve these really great assessments.
That's great. And, you know, I think that should hopefully cover it for the questions that we had around those, you know, to kind of, I suppose, cement the idea that these assessments aren't just pulled together from, you know, a few different places. We really do look into them, and we want them to be as useful as possible. And of course, any feedback is good feedback. So
absolutely,
if you have feedback on those, please do share that. Now, the next question is again for you, Joe.
Sure.
Where do we see the Birdie assessments in the future? You know, what's happening with them now?
Sure.
Updates. So
yeah, so we've done a lot of updates. So I think there's kind of three answers to this question. I mean, the first is we need to build out the assessments further, right? So we've quickly built out a number of them, but there are always more that we could be creating. Mm-hmm. But alongside that, it's also not increasing the number of assessments, but the flow. So as Sarah mentioned, how do we speed up the flow? So offering e-signatures and things like that. So there's the functionality there. The second area that we're really interested in is enabling third parties to fill in some of the assessments. And what I mean by that is giving families the ability to fill in personal preferences, hobbies, just sort of the life history of their loved one, so that that information is already in Birdie before you go and see the client for the initial assessment. So you've got the added benefit of sort of rich data and really good information to write a good person-centered care plan, but also in theory it increases your efficiency. And I suppose the third thing is what it really is super interesting is intelligence. So what we can do is add intelligence to the assessments. When we create our assessments, they're very structured with some free text in them. So for example, if I ask you, can Annie walk? It's not just a yes or no answer. It's yes, she can do it independently. No, she needs a bit of help, or no, she can't do it at all. And it's those structured answers that can allow us to sort of do task suggestions or observation suggestions. And that seems a bit hypothetical, so I'm going to try and illustrate it with an example. So if you take the example of a care recipient who goes into hospital because they've had a fall, thankfully they've not fractured anything, they've not done any harm. But, you know, confidence has been lost and mobility has declined a little bit as a result. So then that client comes home and you go out to do another needs assessment. So Birdie would suggest to you that you might want to go and do an assessment because they've just come out of hospital. You can go and do whichever needs assessments you deem fit as a care manager or a care lead. And based on those answers, so for example, you carry out that needs assessment and you find out not only is her mobility worse, but also she's lost a bit of weight. We can then suggest that you do more in-depth assessments, such as a moving and handling assessment or a nutritional assessment. And off the back of all of those answers, we could suggest tasks that might address those needs well, or we could suggest observations that a carer should be filling in, like weekly weights, for example. So we can really create an intelligent product that can sort of make the care more person-centered, but also speed the assessment process up for you. So they're kind of like the three gross areas or big areas that we're really looking at developing.
That's great. Thank you for sharing those with us, Jo. And I think just some things to highlight there is it's not just an assessment or a form that's that you do on an iPad. Actually, it can be so much more. And these assessments can be the start of really, really interconnected care. And again, it not only makes it easier for you, but again, it's bringing the client right to the core and assessing based on their needs, and not just because of because you have to fill out an assessment. It's all suggested to you, and I think that's really, really great. So thank you for sharing those with us, Jo. There's just a question here that says, how do assessments and ongoing plans include outcomes, and where there are areas for a client to work towards as part of their care and support, both physical and emotional? Now, I suppose, Jo, this is one for you.
Sure. So we know that outcomes are super important. And at the moment, we allow you to record those outcomes in the care plan. And you can record outcomes in all of the 8 care areas that we have. So we have physical care areas like everyday activities and sort of medical problems, but also we address psychological issues as well and social support as well. So you can really you can record outcomes for a whole breadth of issues should you need to, dependent on the client, obviously.
That's great. Thank you, Jo. Now, I've asked you loads of questions, so I'm going to whiz back to Sarah just to wrap us up with a couple of questions, and then we'll head to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, pop them into the chat box for me. But yes, Sarah, back to you now. We know that obviously there has been loads and loads of challenges during COVID-19. We could sit here for hours and talk about them, no doubt. But you went live as a result of COVID, essentially. So my question to you is, how has Birdie helped you deal with issues and barriers during COVID-19?
I suppose it's made us focus more on becoming paperless quicker. It was our aim eventually, but it's given us a sort of a kick in that direction. Yeah. So I think really it's made us a lot more streamlined in the way that the process is done now. I think as it grows, as we grow, it will be a lot easier because I I think as we grow as a company, it will need to be a lot more streamlined, and it will be easy for me to follow if everything's live. So that there's not paper everywhere and I'm constantly back and to the office. I could just basically stay out and keep going. And also it's where everything's stored, because at the end of the day, even all the paperwork that we have completely all has to be stored somewhere. And if we don't go paperless, where's it all going to go? So it's that kind of issue too. So I do feel that going paperless is the way forward. If we can just obviously try and at some point implement the other pieces of paper that we do on assessments into Birdie, I think that would be an outstanding achievement, and it would be great for the future. And I think it would make everything grow, and I think it would make a lot of people use Birdie more if it was that an assessment would be completely paperless. Yeah,
that's great. And definitely, I think that's the aim for, Joe, I know you can probably attest to this. That is the plan, eventually, to have everything paperless.
Indeed, absolutely.
We've heard all about the benefits of it. And I think, it's great that Hummingbird have started to use assessments, especially during COVID-19 when they're most needed. And I really, really hope that they continue to be useful for you. But now I think that is all the questions that I have from me. So let's have a look and see what people have been asking. I know there's been plenty of questions, so thank you so much for all of your questions. If I've missed any that you asked earlier, please just pop them in at the bottom, because there's quite a few. But the first question I have here is, let's see, how does Birdie safeguard against possible data breaches? Now, this is a massive question, actually, because obviously you're putting all of your important information about clients and really personal stuff onto the internet, essentially. Well, into the web. What do we do, Joe, at Birdie to make sure that everything is safe?
Sure. So I'm not going to pretend I know everything about data breaches. We have a very comprehensive tech team and a data protection officer who helps us with all of this. The tech that we develop is secure, and we do everything we can to protect, because we have the privilege to look after people's data. That's something that we take super seriously. So from a development point of view, we do everything we can from a security perspective. In addition, we have also sort of started to complete varying different toolkits which we need, which are high level around health and such. So yeah, it's something that we take really, really seriously.
No, thank you for that. And yes, Joe obviously is not our data protection officer, but what
I think from our point of view as well, for the safeguarding of paperwork, if you think about it from the care team, they were obviously having things like body maps and stuff in the cars, having to bring them back to the office. If there was anything they needed to report, any incidents or accidents, it was paperwork again that was bringing back to the office. So obviously on Birdie at the moment, they're documenting, if anything, they put it through as an alert. So all that's reported directly to us. So it stops them from having to have that paperwork back into, stops it from the potential of it being lost. The same with the MAR charts. They don't have to come back to the office now, which they were previously. Again, a risk of them being lost. We just make sure that obviously all the support workers have locking systems on their phones. I have it on the tablet. We have it on all the laptops. So obviously everything's secure. And I think that has helped us better.
Yeah, completely agree. And I suppose whilst there is obviously a risk with, data online, there's a lot of risk with paper as well. And it's, at Birdie, we do try our absolute best. And I will share our data protection and all the things we do with security in the follow-up email so you can see that. But yes, exactly what Sarah just said, there are so many other risks associated that this is indeed a lot safer. Great. Now, just a question here. When filling in digital assessments prior to seeing the client, will the assessment stay in process or will it become submitted? Just thinking of going from computer network onto Wi-Fi. Maybe Sarah, you can answer that one. So when you fill out the details before and then you go to the client's home, what do? Do you submit it and then edit it, or do you leave it in?
Yeah, I submit it and edit it, but I don't put them as a live client until I've actually been to see them. So obviously, until I'm happy with what I've put, I normally put the basics on there and then grow it once I've obviously seen the client, and then while I'm sat with them, I add to that, I edit it.
That makes sense.
So it makes it more person-centered. Then I put the basics on that they need, but then grow it and make it more person-centered while I'm with the client.
I think that's a really good tip as well for undertaking assessments. If you have some information beforehand, fill it out beforehand, and then you can then go and add to it and add all those extra details. It will save you time in the long run. And I suppose it allows you to really, really think about, like you said about the curtains, for example, when you're there, you're not filling out the basics. That's super useful. Now there's just another question here. So I'm aware that we are 45 minutes in. Great, so let's just check this last one. We've got two more questions here. If you have any more questions, send them through and I'll do my best to answer them in the follow-up email. A question from Christopher here. Now, Joe, this is probably for you. And there was a question earlier about rostering and scheduling systems. How do these work with Birdie, and how easy is it to minimize the disruption if you change your scheduling system but keep Birdie?
Sure. So I suppose the first thing is, I know there was an issue around sort of why don't we deploy in the nighttime and such. We do. I haven't slept for quite a few nights now. So that's been a really enjoyable time. So we do keep those sorts of things in mind to prevent disruption. When I think I'm not totally clear about the question around changing scheduling systems and keeping Birdie running. I think what would be good is if potentially Rav and I have a chat with you, Chris, after this, and we can send you further details. I don't want to sort of give you the wrong information. Just I want to understand the question a bit better, if that's okay.
No, that makes sense. Thanks, Joe. I think there was just a couple there about integrating with rostering partners, but I'm sure you can pick that up afterwards. The last question then is, how is consent compliance of a client logged on the Birdie system, just as legal changes over time have meant there's a need for recording client permission during every care intervention as a safeguard? So, Joe, how do we log the consent compliance of a client?
So in terms of, we, at the moment, as Sarah alluded to, we don't have consent forms on the Birdie system, but what we do have is a document uploader. So for example, if the client signs a consent form, or that needs to be updated, or for any of those reasons, that document can be uploaded onto the Birdie system and is visible within the Birdie record of that client. So we do have ways around not having those forms. I appreciate it's not the ideal situation, but at the moment that's how we encourage people to use it. Sarah, I don't know if that's rings true with you.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Also, if I have like a paperwork from the district nurse or paperwork from social worker or any documents that are sent to me, I upload them and I save them all in that part. Same with the medications are all uploaded and saved in that part, so that it's all streamlined. So if anybody needs to know where any consent for anything is, or who's authorised something, all that paperwork is together.
Perfect. Cool. And that's all together with the assessments that you've undertaken. And I think that's, a really useful tool just to make sure that everything is online as it can be. Well, if we don't have that specific consent available on Birdie, there are ways around it. Cool. Now that is all from me. I don't think that there are any more questions. I'm just going to pop on the screen here. This is the link to book a demo of Birdie if you're interested in seeing more. And where is that? I will get back to any questions that we have on here that I have missed in the follow-up email. But I suppose now all that's left to say is to thank our guests for joining me today. So thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to Joe. It was really, really interesting to hear Hummingbird's story and how you're getting on. And I do hope that this continues. And also thank you for sharing ideas with Joe as well. We really like to hear from our customers whenever possible and make sure that everything that we offer is as useful as possible. So a massive thank you on that one. Now I'm just going to change the slide quickly. Our details for Birdie are on screen. So if you do have any further questions, please do feel free to email them over, and I will send a follow-up email with a recording of this webinar, plus all the questions that were asked and some more information for you. And that is it for this webinar. We are hosting another webinar in 2 weeks' time on the 26th of June. And that is going to be about marketing your care business with Toby from Smooth Digital. And we'll be talking all about how to increase your visibility and the tips and tricks you can use. I'll send a link to that in the follow-up email too. Now that is all from me. Thank you again, guests, for joining me. It was great to have you here. Please enjoy your Friday.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. I hope to speak to you soon.
Take care. Thanks. Bye now.
Bye.
How do I leave?